And when I look back at that experience and the suffering in that experience, what I see is there was something in me, the support of people, the idea that there must be something I can do with this, that brought me out of the idea of reactivity and reacting to it and doing all the things that would go with that, all the things to hide emotions and not feel them and not have an experience and not integrate it. It took me out of reactivity into being able to respond to my suffering.
What if real lasting transformation happens when we're willing to face our shadows, the messy, uncomfortable parts of ourselves we'd rather not look at? And what if the things we avoid out of fear or shame are actually the treasures that wake us up? I'm Carrie Jacobs-Crovetto, executive coach and meditation teacher, and this is Finding Treasures in the Trash. Through raw, unfiltered conversations, I invite you to turn toward what you've disowned and begin integrating it back into the whole beautiful human you were meant to be. Your treasure doesn't always live in the light. Sometimes it's buried in the trash. So, grab your gloves. Let's go dumpster diving. Hello, friends, and welcome to Finding Treasures in the Trash. I'm Carrie Jacobs-Crovetto. Oh my gosh, are we going to have a fun, deep, enlightening conversation today? My guest is James Rosser. James is a longtime friend of mine, but I need to tell you about him because this guy has done a lot in his life, and he's been a friend to me and also an inspiration to me. He's been meditating for a long time, since 1987. He started his journey at Spirit Rock with James Braz, and today he serves as a Dharma teacher and board member for Insight LA. So if you're in LA, you may know James. He co-leads retreats all over the place, including one that we're doing together coming up in September here of this year. He has extensive training, including graduations from Insight LA's facilitator and dedicated to the Dharma programs, Spirit Rock's dedicated practitioner program. And we were together in the inaugural class of Jack Kornfield and Tara Brock's Mindfulness Meditation Teacher Certification Program. That's where we met. He also is a mentor at Kristen Neff's Self-Compassion Institute. If you don't know Kristen Neff's work, we might talk about it a little, but it's amazing. He's a trained teacher for the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. And if that weren't enough, he's also intensively trained in dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. He currently works as a licensed therapist at UCLA's Resnick Neuropsychiatric Hospital. He designs and grows their intensive outpatient programs. He holds a master's in social welfare from UCLA. And the icing on the cake, this guy used to be in finance. So that's going to be a big underlying kickoff point here for this. So James, welcome. I'm so excited to have you.
It's great to be here. Always to be with you. Yes.
Oh, well, so let's start with the end of that wonderful bio, which is you were in finance. You were a finance guy.
Yep, I was. Yes. Yes, for 10 years, in fact. Yeah.
And so what changed?
Well, I went into finance because I was trying to find a career choice that I thought made sense. And I went into it and ended up in corporate lending and in merchant banking and actually enjoyed it. And I think I was pretty good at it. I worked with a lot of healthcare companies, and that was pretty fulfilling. And though my life kept developing, and as part of that, what happened was that I started having to look at what was really going on in the world in my life. And a lot of that had to do with living through the height of the AIDS epidemic. And I stopped counting after I lost 30 people. And then I actually was in a situation where I was misdiagnosed myself.
With HIV?
With Kaposi sarcoma, which at that time, being the age I was, which was 27, 28 at the time, if you had KS at the time and you were 27, that meant you had AIDS. And So, I remember going to the doctor's office and he wouldn't make an appointment with me until 6 p.m. And I go into his office and there's a receptionist and him. We go into his private office and sit down. And he says, "You have AIDS and you probably have 8 months."
Wow.
And yeah, I remember, I remember driving out of the building and looking up on a billboard. And what I saw on the billboard was my funeral.
I mean,
And
this is incredible. I mean,
yeah,
incredibly defining moment, like where
yeah,
you're given a death sentence, right?
yes, absolutely. And what happened was that some good friends of mine rallied around me and they had some knowledge of a research program actually that was trying out different medications, and they got me set up. The program was actually at UCLA, and they got me signed up, and I went in and was tested by they set up for the research protocols, and they kept retesting my blood work and stuff, and I was getting irritated because I wanted to be on some medication trial, and they called me in I think for the fifth time. And when I went in, we're back in the doctor's office again, the private office again, except he has the chief of pathology from UCLA with him. And he has the pathologist tell me that they pulled the slides that were used to make the diagnosis and tells me the slides were misread
Mm.
and that I didn't have chaos. It was a dermatofibroma or something like that, that a thickening of the skin, and that I did not have chaos. And in fact, and they both told me, they said, "We've done your blood work 100 times now. You're not even HIV positive."
Wow.
And I shut down. I said thank you and walked out.
What do you mean by shut down?
I had no emotional reaction, which put an asterisk by that.
Yeah, because
That
I was gonna
explains a lot.
say,
That explains a lot in my life. But I shut down and I went out. And then over time, I was in therapy already at that point, and I started to have a reaction to it, but I also started to try to figure out what had happened to me. And as I did, what I realized was that I had this experience of being in a doctor's office and being told that you're dying. And that's not an experience that a lot of people have. And maybe there's some reason. Maybe there's something I can do with this because I know that. I know that feeling. I know what it's like to be told, get your affairs in order. And so I started looking for ways that I could use that experience to be there for other people. And I found an organization that specialized in what they called was the compassionate presence. Talk about fate taking a hand.
just to go back,
Yeah,
many of us imagine or have had moments in our life, right, where we're not sure if our blood work is going to come back okay, or
right,
something's been wrong with us. And we imagine, or we're just watching a dramatic television show where this happens. And you think, wow, what if this were me someday? And I'm sitting across from a doctor and they say, you've got X, Y, and Z and you have X amount of time to live.
right.
So I'm just, and imagine, like for me, that's a terrifying moment and also like a call to action moment. Like, okay, if I've only got this much time left, how am I going to actually show up to my life? And for me, I'll just say, James, this was like a really big pathway into
Right,
Buddhist life for me,
right.
like
Yes,
imagining death for a whole different reasons than yours, but it
right.
was a big way. So were you already on the Buddhist path and meditating at that time? Or were you sort of like finance guy working in finance 30, having a great time?
I had just met James Barris maybe 6 months before this. I'd gone to Esalen. My therapist, wonderful man named Alan Goodman, who's long since passed. He died of AIDS. What a wonderful man he was. He had suggested, because I was so uptight, he kept giving me things to do, and one of them was to go to Esalen. And so I did go to Esalen, and the workshop I chose was James Barris. Yeah, that was a connection I made about 6 months before this happened. So it was already on the radar, but I didn't know what it meant. All I knew was that I was able to sit in for the first time in my life I'm tall. I'm 6'3". Tall people always have cold hands and cold feet. I know. I was sitting there at Esalen doing meditation, learning it for the very first time, formal meditation for the very first time. And I realized that my hands got warm. And at one point they were like freshly baked bread. And I was like, what does this mean? And you know what the thing was? It really did mean something because it meant that I wasn't, my entire nervous system had shifted. And the anxiety and fear that were always present in me growing up queer had calmed down.
I just kind of want to round this out and kind of go back, shift back, because we kind
Yep.
of started, like, I feel like we started in one of those movies where, like, there's the opening scene, boom, doctor's office, right? 8 months to live. And then we wind back a little.
Yep.
So, because I'm hearing that this sounds like this year of 30-ish sounds like an extremely pivotal year. And for those of you who are listening who don't know what Esalen is, because I know we have listeners from all over the world,
Right.
Esalen is a beautiful healing space here in Central California where you have to sign up for a workshop and you go and there's these natural hot springs and it's clothing optional. And so you can be like, you can either wear clothes or not. It's very California for those of you
Yeah.
listening, but it's also one of the foremost healing centers really in the world at this point. So here you are, and this is kind of this pivotal moment. Take me back.
Yeah.
Take me back to like getting to this pivot moment in
Right.
your life.
So after I found out that, after I was told that I was sick, I did not have those moments where I go, I got to get my life together. That didn't happen. It happened a little bit later, but I shut down. And, I ignored my emotions a lot when I grew up because I needed to be safe. I grew up in the South. I grew up in a fundamentalist family. I knew I was queer since I was 8. I was shut down and I continued to shut down. And, my friends would try and I would be like, nope. And, and so I went through a lot of different phases in there, of trying different ways to deal with it. A lot of them were like things like, well, you know what? It doesn't really matter how much money I spend because I'm not paying the bills anyway, so I would do outrageous things, and made choices about it, like not telling my parents
Hmm. Were you
because
out at that time? Did your parents
no,
know?
no,
No.
no.
Okay.
And I made the choice, and this is one that I think about often. I made the choice that I'd rather die first than tell them.
Wow. That's so
And
heartbreaking to hear from me.
yeah, well, and there's a full circle in that one. But basically, what happened was I found out I was okay. It was like I actually, honestly, there was something in me that when I was told I was going to die, I went, thank God.
Thank God you're going to die.
Yeah, I can't do this anymore. And looking back, I know that, and I did not know that then.
And was this like the shutting down and the hiding and the like, what was all the this that you couldn't do anymore?
Carrying a facade, being somebody, working to do what I thought I should do, to be the person I thought I should be, to look the way I thought I should. There's a book called The Best Little Boy in the World. And it talks about how a lot of times, especially for queer men, what you're doing is you're constructing a life to make you perfect, to make up for what you perceive to be something that everybody else will see and reject in you. And I was caught in that. I was totally caught in that. So I was tired. I was tired.
Tired and young. I mean, you're
Yes.
young at that point. And for all
Yeah.
I know the world's changed, but it hasn't completely changed. And so,
No.
I just
No.
have this moment of wanting to say, if you're relating to what James is saying and you feel that this like pressure of just facading and hiding and being tired and like, it's real, right?
It's absolutely real.
That's real.
It's real, and it's a protective thing. And it's important to understand that choices like that are made by people for their protection. And it's a perception, and often though with real consequences if people found out. And so yeah, so when I found out that I was okay, I was kind of stunned, and then went into shock with it.
Were you stunned in like, I have to keep going? Or was there a difference done? Was it like,
It
okay, I
was
have to
like, what am I
change?
going to do now that I'm going to keep going? This was not, I kind of got settled in this idea that I was leaving. It's like sometimes people who've come to near death experiences say things like, oh, so this is how it ends. It was like somebody told me the answer. This is how it ends. And then all of a sudden it was like, no, it doesn't. Yeah. So I spent a lot of time finding and exploring why I was reacting the way I was. But the marker that kept moving in it was this idea that I have this information that people don't have, and what can I do with it? And that's when things really changed. Was like, I've got to do something with this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I found this organization that did the compassionate presence. And they specialized in working with people who were terminally ill. And at that point, their mission had predominantly become people with AIDS because it was swamping the system because there was no even way to even manage the disease really at that point.
Yeah. And for those of you who are really young, who don't remember the 80s, because James and I are in our 60s now.
Yes.
I think, right? I think you're in your
Oh yeah.
60s.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, this was like a terrifying, sad, hard time,
Yes.
especially it was all over, but especially in major cities all over the world, right? Where people were just dying, and it was mostly gay people or mostly people of color. And so these were marginalized communities where at the time, initially, like, quote unquote, those of us who were not in those marginalized communities didn't feel like it would affect us. And so there wasn't getting attention, right?
Yep.
It just
Right.
wasn't getting attention.
Right.
And so, I was, in my 20s and 30s, I hung out in New York and LA, and my community was queer men,
Yep.
of course. If you know me, you know. And, so it was the same thing, where like
Yeah.
there was a helplessness
Yes.
around what was happening and a fear, but the fear, like, unlike COVID, which had to be like really dealt with in 2 years of time, this was not dealt with. And
Right.
so people were just dying.
We were dealing with an administration federally that wouldn't even mention the word AIDS for a long time in there. And so not much was done. And a lot of people died because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So then when I found this organization and I went in to get trained to work with people one on one, the idea was these people need somebody to go in who's not a family member, not a friend, but who's there simply to be a presence for them. So they can say anything they want, feel anything they want to feel, because you're there to listen. You're there to
Cuss
listen and
anybody out?
support.
They could cuss anybody out.
I heard some great stuff. Yeah, and it was like, or how people felt about the family that was around them, or the people who were trying to take care of them, and you were the one who heard it all, and it's just a beautiful model. And yeah, and I went through quite a few clients, and the longest I had a client was 3 months before they died. And then I started leading groups for people who were terminally ill, and then I started teaching people to run groups. And then I started troubleshooting groups that were in trouble. And this whole time, my banking career is doing actually very well. And it's like I was doing, finishing deals that had tombstones in the Wall Street Journal and all this. It was going good. And at the same time, though, what I was really thrilled by was what I was doing. So a group of friends of mine took me out to dinner. And we got us all seated, and we're all there. And one of them looks up and says, "James, this is an intervention."
Wow.
And there were 6 of them, and they said, "You need to go back to graduate school because you need to change what you do because we know what your heart knows."
Wow. I mean, this is like one of those angel moments
Yes, totally.
where like 6 of your friends happen to also be 6 angels in your life who said,
Right.
we can see your heart. I
Yes.
mean, that's so touching, James.
It was amazing. It was
Are you still
amazing.
friends with those people?
Most of them are gone, but yes, some of them, yeah. And
Mm.
yeah, and so that group really helped me through. I did a 45-mile backpacking trip through the Ventana Wilderness to think about this with a Zen monk leading the experience. His name is Steve Harper. Is a wonderful man. Used to lead groups out of Esalen, and we hiked into Tassajara at the end. So all these things in my life are starting to point me in a
Yeah.
direction. It's like, okay, it's like fate's calling. Are you listening? So I made up my mind to do it. And then I went back and I applied for graduate schools and I fought to get in actually, to get in and did.
So
And
I
yeah,
have to ask you because I feel like so many of us, I mean, I certainly went through this around this age, my 30s, where I was
yeah,
like, I had a choice.
right,
Did I keep working in ad agencies or did I there was my heart calling even back then.
right.
And the reason I bring it up, and I think back to Henry Most, he did a podcast with Finding
Yes,
Treasures in the Trash, and he talks about
right,
this moment, right? It's like sort of
right.
Carl Jung 101, like this moment when you suddenly re-meet yourself.
Yes,
You could have just continued to work in banking and volunteered on the side. And some people would call that like a really integrated life where like you're making
mhm,
good money and you're
right.
also doing this work on the side. What was it though that said, I have to say goodbye to all of that?
It had to do with what made room for priorities. And when I look back, what I realized was happening was that I was discovering how to reinvent myself in order to be in the service of healing and to be able to show up for people because that was something that made a difference in the world. And yeah, banking made a difference in the world too for people in lots of other ways. This was different. This felt different. And there's a point in time, and one of the gifts of having this experience of being diagnosed was that you look to see what's really important for you and you start to learn what your values really are. And as you unwind from that, and the volunteer work was a big part of that, when you unwind from that and you really get a clear view of your values, things change. Things change.
Well, and you're
Yeah.
pointing to something um so important. I had this moment last week where so I do this regularly, James, and you probably know this because you've known me for a little while, where like I create something and then I launch it all and then I doubt it. Like, this is just it's like the artist's way, right?
Right.
It seems. And so I had this moment where I was like, oh, is Finding Treasures in the Trash, is that really the right name for this podcast? And what am I really trying to say? And is it shadow work I'm talking about? Like, what is it? But what I realized in hearing your story, because it reflects my story, is what brought me, for example, to the path of Buddhism or the path to meditation. And this podcast isn't necessarily about that, but because I'm about a lot of that, it has a pretty big Venn diagram,
Right.
is like these extreme moments of suffering
Yes.
where we're broken down or we have a moment where we become really present to our lives.
Yes. Well, and this is something that as my life grew and I grew to be not afraid of something that was a spiritual practice, which took a long time. But when I did, and I started to connect with what I know to be so fundamental to my Buddhism and my practice, which is that understanding the nature of suffering. And when I look back at that experience and the suffering in that experience, what I see is there was something in me, the support of people, the idea that there must be something I can do with this that brought me out of the idea of reactivity and reacting to it and doing all the things that would go with that, all the things to hide emotions and not feel them and not have an experience and not integrate it. It took me out of reactivity into being able to respond to my suffering. And that's the key to the door. This is why the practice asks us to look at suffering because the difference between reactivity and responding makes all the difference in your life. And so that's what I know looking back, that's what I learned. I know it now in this beautiful way, in this beautiful practice, and I see it. So yeah, that guided my choices.
So I'm going to ask you a question
Yep.
around, and maybe I've never asked anyone this question before, although I have so many friends that are, like me, practicing Buddhists, but are also psychotherapists, including our teachers. You and I,
Many
our
of them, yes.
teachers, right?
Yes.
And so were there ways that, because here you are, your six friends tell you, go follow your heart, go back to school,
Yeah.
become a therapist. At the same moment, grace has like bestowed these little miracles on you, right? You
Mhm.
hike into a big, beautiful Buddhist retreat center, for example, or you end
Yes.
up at Esalen, right? It's like,
Right.
what does Ram Dass say? Knock, 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 knock.
Hello,
Like
hello. Yeah.
it's always knocking if
Right.
only you were listening.
Right.
And so you go back to school. So here's my question. Did you find that study of psychotherapy and the study of Buddhism intercepted for you, or were they very different? Because I have a story that psychotherapy is all about self and seeing the self and healing the self, whereas Buddhism is all about self in relationship to no self, or self in relationship to awakened.
Well, it's a particular point of view, and I think I was fortunate, and my first therapist was Gestalt therapist, which of course is what Esalen was all about, because Fritz Perls lived there as a resident teacher, instructor, mentor for a long time, and Fritz
Can you
Perls is one of
explain to people, like if there's somebody listening who's like, what? What's Gestalt? Can you explain the nut of that?
Gestalt is about understanding the experience in the moment, in the present, and it's very much about discovering what is true in your experience and gaining insight from it. There's a wonderful technique called the open chair, which I ended up doing at Esalen actually in a workshop about how to approach Gestalt, where you're working with someone and they're reflecting back to you what your experience is as you start to discover the insights that are true for you in your life and in that moment. And the thing about it was, because I did psychodynamic therapy, I've done uh, cognitive behavioral therapy. And the thing within all of that was that at the same time that for a long time, the concept of the self I just assumed was real and there and permanent. At the same time, what I was experiencing was it's not. And the gift of that, because it's that of the ability to know that what you're considering and calling the self is not static, is not one and done, but continues to change and evolve is a gift. Oh my goodness. It's a gift.
It's funny you're mentioning this. So for the listeners, I just started the dedicated practitioner program at Spirit Rock that James completed. And James, I haven't told you this story yet, but they
Mhm.
asked, they went around the room, 60 people, and asked for us to name one of our sort of, I don't remember the exact words, but it was name one of your most foundational or impactful moments when you came to Buddhist practice. What was one moment early on? And what struck me about the answers that people gave was most of them were moments where extreme suffering had happened, right?
Yes.
Loss of someone really important, and mine, uh, mine was, I remember driving in the car. It was like 1976. I was in fourth grade. My fabulous mom, who, if you have followed me or are reading any of my stuff, I had a very complex mom. She was, I think, undiagnosed bipolar. We couldn't diagnose her because she got put on drugs and became a drug addict, unfortunately, I was like 7. But she was also amazing and glamorous and so smart and so funny and so charismatic. So here we are driving in her white Cadillac with houndstooth interior. Okay, 1970 something. We're driving down the street and she looks at me, and I had just gotten an ant farm. And so I was really into like watching the ants do all their work, right? In this farm. And in this, I don't know if they still have these. It was like 1970. So it was this big square plastic farm, and they would farm away. And here we are in her car, and she looks at me and she says, we're all kind of like that ant farm that you have.
Mhm.
We're just a bunch of ants crawling around, and there's millions and millions of us. And God, I was raised Catholic. She says, and God looks down on us, and he doesn't really know the difference. We're just a bunch of ants. And so I share this in this moment, and I hear the gasp, and they're like, oh my God, it was so sad. Like your mom told her she's nothing but an ant. And I said, I had a moment at like that age where I was like, there was freedom.
Yes. Yes.
I was
Mhm.
like, you mean I'm just another ant? And I'm going to like live and die just like the ants in my ant farm. I felt release from the
Yeah.
self
Right. Yes.
at that young age. And I always say that was like kind of my first lesson my mom gave me in Buddhist practice. So I'm just reflecting back your way, this idea of that moment when we come into contact with the possibilities that the self is not static.
Yes. And this idea too that it's not static, but in what you're talking about, the delusion of separateness. And I understand that you felt relief in that. And there used to be a bumper sticker when, I don't know, 20s, 30s, maybe I was in my 40s, that people had, especially in California, of course, that it said, I feel much better since I've given up all hope.
It's so true.
It's so California, right? But the thing was, I would read that and they would go, yes. And my friends would be horrified. They'd read it and they go, that's awful. I didn't react that way. I looked at it and I said, yes, I get it. And that's the same sort of thing. It's like there's experiences that come and you see them at a different level. You see it at this symbolic level that has more of an access to a way, a system of the way the world works. And actually, it's what the Buddha talked about. So yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I want to hear a little more about the work you're doing around
yes,
compassion and the
yes,
compassion work, because it
yeah,
sounds like that was also where it kind of started, right? Like,
absolutely, it was. Yes. It was a through line through being a therapist all this time, but also it was the thing that helped me find a ground in my practice. Since I grew up fundamentalist and a faith that essentially rejected me because I was queer, and I didn't want to have anything to do with anything that sounded like religion. So when I found mindfulness, the issue I had with it was that it wasn't secular enough for me. And so I always tried to stay very much in the secular train or track of mindfulness. And
what can I ask a question? Like, why was that for you? You just didn't want anything to do with anything that felt too structured or rigid or shut in?
because my religion had felt dangerous to me. Religion felt dangerous because it was a
Mm.
place where, you know, contrary to what many people experience with religion, for me, it was a place of danger, of rejection, of possible real fear of harm. And so I didn't want to have anything to do with that. But what happened was over time was that I struggled a lot with my mindfulness practice for many years. And I didn't really sit with other people. I didn't sit in sanghas. Then I started. And one of the most important things that ever happened was that for the first time at that point, I found out about the heart practices. I hadn't known them. And I was meditating all this time without seeing this other part of things called the heart practices of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And I heard about them. And it was like, well, okay, well, that's that thing over there. So that's kind of some facet of this. But over time, what I came to realize is that it's not a facet. It is the practice.
Hmm.
And that's what changed everything with my practice was feeling that and knowing that because it brought compassion in. And compassion was actually a driving force for me in my life. So when I knew that compassion could come into my practice, it was like, I'm home. I'm home.
Yeah. And the way you described it too, I think with compassion, making it real for you.
Yes.
Because I think there's, you know, people come to my Sangha and it's like, oh, I want this for me.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And that is a good reason to start. Cause if your body isn't, if your body, mind, nervous system isn't quieted, it's very hard to seek transformation. Like if it's just for you, it's sort of a selfish endeavor.
Right.
Transformation, which sounds like a really big word, is just really that moment with my husband where I could make a different choice. And that extends itself out to everything, right? Our political sphere, being
Right.
able to act in any way. So what if, talk
Well,
about compassion.
let's roll back the tape because it'll
Yeah.
help. So when I would sit and I would work with mindfulness without compassion, all of my patterns, if you will, my habit thinking patterns would kick in. And I love the way when you said that people will come and sit with you and go, I want to sit, I want to do this, because that brings up something that I really got to know well, which is the subtle aggression of self improvement.
Mm. Ooh, the subtle aggression of self improvement, as in
Right.
I'm aggressing myself because I always need improvement
Because I'm not good enough.
because I'm not good enough.
Because the way I am isn't good enough. Who I am isn't good enough. I'm not good enough. And so then it turns into my practice has to be perfect. Because if my practice is perfect, then I am perfect or I am better. And so I think, and my experience is far from unique in that many, many years I struggled with that because I could never make my practice perfect.
I feel a little lump in my throat. I think that was a big
Yeah.
reason for me early on. I don't know if
Yes.
I feel
Right.
that way anymore, but I think that's
Yeah.
probably was true for me. Like I must be perfect, so I have to practice harder and I have to improve.
Right.
Mhm.
And this is where compassion comes in, because practicing without compassion, because really in those moments, what is needed is compassion for you and your experience sitting, carrying with you this idea inside that you have to be different than you are, that you have to be perfect, completely unachievable, and all these things that are these very independence oriented, individualistically oriented things that are driven into us. And when compassion comes in and you see in yourself what you're asking yourself to do and what that drive is, then you can bring in compassion into that moment and go, wow, this right here is suffering. What I'm demanding of myself, what I'm asking of myself is suffering. And I need to just have compassion for that right now, for this experience, because I'm hurting, I'm suffering. And I need to realize that's going on. And then bring in these wonderful elements of mindful self compassion, which are that also, it's common humanity because so many people experience that. As I
Mhm.
used to tell people, you can think that what you're experiencing right now is just you. But if we really went around LA and found all the other people who experience it, we'd fill up Dodger Stadium 4 times.
Yeah.
You're not alone. And then also learning how not to talk to yourself like your internal critic talks to you all the time, because that always came in my practice too. And my internal critic is brutal.
Yeah, mine too.
Part of my journey in understanding this internal critic and its role in my mindfulness and also in my compassion practice is that one time I was sitting and I was in one of those places where that platform of mindfulness was really there for me, and I could see it all happening. And I could see the internal critic put this dialogue out there. And I realized that my internal critic sounded just like Judge Judy Shineland. And I started laughing. And that was a really big moment, actually. And when I teach mindful self-compassion, I always tell about that because I call my internal critic Judge Judy. And the thing that was important about that was, number one, I started to see it differently. I started to see it not as a part of me and not me. It was present, but it wasn't me. And that it has its own sort of life. And seeing it as Judge Judy gave me an opportunity to go, oh God, not again. But also too, there's compassion goes further, because compassion also says, can I understand this part of me? Can I understand that this part of me exists for a reason? And for me, part of that journey was that my internal critic was built to protect me from harm when I was little. So my internal critic was on alert for everything that could give me away, that could show somebody else who I truly was, that would show that I'm not perfect, because those things would always make me vulnerable to being found out. And found out meant losing my family, my community, my existence, basically. So what I needed to do was to be able to understand that this internal critic was trying to save me, but this internal critic got installed when I was a little kid and doesn't know how to talk to me like an adult. Although it sounds like Judy Shineland, but it's not talking to me like an adult. It's telling me things that a kid would because it's always extreme danger in the background. It's trying to help me and it doesn't know how. It's like so many people's parents. It's like my parents. They probably really did want to try to help me and they didn't know how. It wasn't in their toolbox. And so what self-compassion in practice does is it asks you to find inside of you this compassionate inner voice instead, which comes to you and says, I really care about you. And I know what's going on right now. Things could be better. And I want you to live well. I want you to feel good. I want you to be okay. How can we do that? No, that's a totally different experience than you're always screwing up. You don't do this right. Everybody's going to find out you're. It's like a totally different experience, and that's motivating yourself with compassion. Now, what I'm referring to, it's Buddhist practice, absolutely, but it also was organized into this way of practice and seeing it by Kristen Neff, by Dr. Kristen Neff, who was the original researcher behind mindful self-compassion and who started this and who I have the great pleasure of working with uh, at this and in the Self Compassion Institute.
I know I
And
have a fantasy that the three of us will be on this podcast together. I really,
oh my God, I would love that.
I would love to know her.
She is amazing. She's a powerhouse. She's an incredible researcher, and she is so dedicated to this material. And she came to this material out of her own practice because she's a very strong practice. And so the practice then becomes about how can you show up for yourself with compassion? How can you show up for yourself with the compassion that you would give freely to anybody else? You look at somebody, you look at people around you, and you see their suffering, and your heart just automatically opens to them. I call it the quivering of the heart. It's that moment when you look and your heart literally quivers when you see suffering. And why can't you show up for yourself the same way when you see your suffering?
So I have a story
Yeah,
that in the world, we, particularly in the last 6.5 years,
yeah,
it's been really hard for most people.
absolutely.
And I have a story that underneath that, we have in many ways had to harden our hearts like
Mm,
never before.
right.
And that things like compassion and things like a quivering heart and things like our heart cracking open when we see certain things, it's almost like the rush of all the social media and all the stuff that comes out of us is like numbed us into not feeling anything, good
Yes,
or bad.
right.
How does compassion work help us to refine that the animation and the fabric of what humans were meant to be and do and feel?
The first way it helps is it calls you to know your experience, which many people can't really do readily now. And in order to really see your experience, it means you have to actually take a pause from being on your social media. And you have to realize how social media is constructed because you're falling into a pattern that people who design social media actually design to keep you involved. And that helps to build up this place where you don't feel, where you're shut down. So the first thing is to really do that, to really be able to understand and see your experience.
Yeah, except don't pause our stuff.
Yeah, right. Of course, right.
Keep listening
Right.
to my stuff on social media.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
always a sweet irony in all of that, but we're just going to hold that as true.
Well, that's a little bit different from the rabbit hole that comes up on things like
Yes.
I'm not going to name platforms, but that comes up when rabbit holes happen when you're on platforms, and 45 minutes later, you're like, "What happened?" Yeah.
Mhm.
So the first thing is being able to see that. The second thing, and the reason for doing that, that's mindfulness. That's mindfulness. When you can see your experience, you're bringing mindfulness into the moment because you're saying, this is what's happening right now. This is the experience right now. I'm numb. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I'm hopeless.
My heart's closed.
My heart's closed. That hurts. That actually hurts.
Mhm.
And you see that. That's mindfulness. But then you want to take in this other piece that comes in when you feel this way, which is when you feel this way, you think you're the only person who's experiencing this. You really believe it because you're shutting down. And that is an illusion. That's an illusion because the truth is that many people feel this way. So you're breaking through this illusion of separateness and this illusion that you are in this isolation that we live in these times and seeing other people experience it. And then you're bringing real compassion in because you're starting to talk to yourself in a way that shows compassion. So you're talking to yourself the way you would to a beloved child or a dear friend that you care dearly about, where you're like, God, this hurts. I see you hurting. I do. And I get it. I understand it. It's learning to be able to show up for yourself and say the words your heart needs to hear.
And it sounds like it starts with you, right? I mean, I
Absolutely.
know a little about this too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm playing a little dumb here, I guess. But
Yep.
I also, as I'm listening to you and I'm allowing myself to be in student mode because I love that mode.
Yeah.
Like I know that even as a dedicated Buddhist meditator, even as a executive coach, even as somebody who's doing great work, I hope, in the world at Stanford and other places, like
Mhm.
I know that I have had to struggle to keep my heart open sometimes because so
Yeah.
much is coming at me. I can't,
Yeah.
it will break me
Yes.
if I let it in. That's really what I feel sometimes. It will
Yes.
break me.
Right.
What do you say to that? What do you say to
Well,
me?
what I say is, I know who you are, and I know that who you are is a kind person. And kindness needs nurturing, especially now. And there's a wonderful poem by Naomi Shihab Nye called Kindness. And one of the lines in the poem is the need to be able to experience suffering until you see the size of the cloth and how big suffering is in the world. And then, only then, can you understand that kindness is the only thing there is, the only thing that matters. So the first is to come into that kindness and to understand that for us to live in kindness means we have to do something else. And this is crucial. And this is something that people sometimes don't see, which is at some point in our journey, each one of us has to take a vow about non harming, about living in life and showing up in a way that we choose to decrease all harm that we might be causing in the world, to bring in non harming.
And to ourselves first, right?
And to yourself first, because if you don't bring it into yourself first, it doesn't turn back out. And that's with the kindness and compassion. The reason you start with yourself is because, well, as Jack Cornfield, someone we both know and love, says, if you're not in your circle of compassion, it's not complete. You have to show up for yourself first, so you're able to show up for other people.
I feel like we could talk all day. We probably really
Oh,
could.
we
Like
and
we could
we
just
and
keep
yes,
going. And listeners have left. They're like, bye. You guys are just on your own journey now. Well,
right,
if you've liked what you've heard, by the way, James and I are teaching a retreat. It's in
yes,
California. We are calling it a sacred pause. And
yeah,
we talked a lot about why it's so important for us to take those pauses, especially now, even if it is to look for the good. And we're teaching that here in Northern California at a place called Land of Medicine Buddha, one of the most special
yeah,
places I have ever meditated in. It's a Tibetan center with these ancient redwoods that are like 200 years old that stand in witness, bear witness to our
mhm,
practice.
right,
And we're also going to be talking about how meditation and Buddhist meditation unlocks room for things like creativity. And I think inside of creativity lives looking for good. I
Hmm.
believe that.
Yes.
So you can find information on that on my website at bravedirections.com. And we'd love to have you join us. And I think through one more week, I think there's a discount. If you go to the website, you'll see that there. But it's actually very fairly priced. So maybe you'll join us. But James, we have one
Yes.
last thing to do.
Okay. All right.
You've probably no doubt heard about the very famous trash can card tarot.
I just love it. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So here we go. You remember, you know the rules. I'm going to spin the proverbial wheel, which doesn't
Yep.
really exist. It's my finger pointing to a question. I'm going to close my eyes and you're going to get a surprise question. We don't know what it's going to be.
Bring it.
Okay. So here I go. Ooh. What question do you wish more people would ask themselves when they're hurting?
The question I wish people would ask themselves is when they're hurting, honestly, and I actually touched on this a second ago, but it's a question that I teach a lot of my students, which is what are the words that your heart needs to hear right now? What are the words your heart needs to hear that would make your heart respond by saying, "Oh, thank you. I needed that." Because when you're suffering, the heart's calling for something. The heart's calling for something. And to know and to get to know what it is that your heart needs to hear is what touches you. And it touches on you, your values, the core of who you are, you know? Yeah.
So
So
beautiful.
what does my heart need to hear in this moment? What would make my heart say, thank you? Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you. Mm.
So good to be with you.
And you.
Thanks for spending time with me and for having the courage to listen inward. If you'd like to continue the journey, you can find me at bravedirections.com, and there you can sign up for my newsletter and something really exciting. If you're ready to begin exploring your own inner terrain, I've created something called 5 Days to Truth. It's a complimentary 5-day meditation journey that helps you start gently digging into your own trash and discovering what's there waiting for you. So until we meet again, be kind to yourself and trust what's emerging, because inside the muck lives the gold.
Thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to a Magic Thread Media podcast.